Good morning and ni hao, and I have just nearly exhausted my repertoire of Chinese or Mandarin language and culture. But I am delighted to be here today to moderate this panel of distinguished international scholars and leaders that have been engaged in pretty much the same efforts across the globe that we have been engaged in the United States. Last night, we had the privilege to learn about what the great state of Utah has done to advance, strengthen, expand their Mandarin language offerings in the state of Utah. We saw the product of their efforts. And who was not proud to see those ninth graders come on stage, have the poise, the language, the cultural appropriateness to deliver what they were asked to do in a professional setting. This is outside of the classroom. It was not rehearsed language, but they were here to perform a real-world task with the language and skills that they have acquired. Let's give the state of Utah and the teachers that prepared those students a big hand. What the state of Utah has done is an example for all of us, but similar efforts have been going on in other states of the Union here. I am very proud of what we've been doing in the state of California, not on the scale of Utah, but we have done in the last decade quite a bit to promote, advance the teaching of Mandarin language across the state. Moreover, we have been very involved in the preparation of teachers that will make that possible into the future. I really believe that the legacy of language teaching in the United States depends on the teachers and how well we prepare them today. The efforts to elevate the level of Mandarin in the United States has been the great work of the College Board, Asia Society, and I also want to mention StarTalk, because StarTalk has been a wonderful partner in this effort in California and across the United States. Today, we're going to learn about the similar efforts that our colleagues here on the dais have been doing across the globe. And I am very happy to facilitate this conversation among us. And we've structured the panel as a conversation among us and also among you. So be thinking of the questions that you would like to ask of any of their panel members at the end. We are hoping to be able to reserve approximately 10 to 15 minutes for questions and answers. So be ready with your questions. And then when that time comes, I will then explain the process for how you can address your questions to the panel. So, panel, I'm very delighted again to be here with you, and let's start our work. In a way of an introduction to our audience here, to ourselves, because we're all coming from different parts of the globe, I would like for you to introduce your country's initiative, what you've been doing in this effort, and also what were the motivators or the factors, they could be political, economic, or social, that prompted your country to engage in this work. Catherine, would you like to start?
Okay, thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. I'm Catherine Carruthers from the UCL Institute of Education, Confucius Institute. We've been working over the last 10 years on developing Chinese in schools across England. But what I particularly wanted to mention to you today is the new initiative which we are delivering on behalf of the UK Department for Education. It's called the Mandarin Excellence Programme. We will have, when the programme's fully underway, 5,000 students who, wait for it, are learning Chinese for 8 hours a week, 4 taught hours, 4 non-taught hours, who will be on their way to a high level of fluency. So they will take Chinese right up to the age of 18 and come out at the end with HSK 4 or 5 plus the A level. So that's an exciting initiative for a country that's not best known for its language efforts. And I think it's come about because really the political, economic and social reasons. So the political relationship with China is very strong. The economic drivers, I think, for us all were covered last night during the dinner. And social, I think there is already a lot of interest in Chinese. The children are interested in learning. We've been doing an interesting program on Shanghai maths. We've managed to sort of, with the advocacy, grow Shanghai maths, Mandarin. We should have them both. And so we've been building advocacy for our program across the UK, and this has led to this specific government initiative.
Thank you, Catherine. Winnie, would you like to share what you've been doing in France?
Good morning, everybody. Bonjour tout le monde. I'm from France. I work at the Academy of Paris. My main role is the application of foreign language policy of France Ministry. I work for control the quality of Chinese teaching, etc. Thank you.
Thank you, Win.
Thank you. Hey, good morning, everyone. I'm Eng Hui. I come from this tiny state island of Singapore. So for those of you who are familiar with Singapore, we are really, really tiny. So it's always an honor for us to be invited on a global panel like this. Yeah, so some introduction about our country. What we have is what we call this bilingual policy. And in this, it means that we want every citizen to really know and learn 2 languages. And of course, that's English, and one of which is their mother tongue. So my role in the Ministry of Education, we call ourselves the Mother Tongue Languages Branch. We look into the curriculum for these mother tongue languages, which is Chinese, Malay, and Tamil. And it's very important for us to have this language because it's not just for the economic and strategic purpose of going for the learning about the going global and all this. It's also for the cultural values and the binding force within the community. So these 2 prongs are very important for us, and we commit ourselves for every child to being able to acquire these 2 languages to as high a level as possible. Yeah, so that's about our country. Thank you.
Thank you, Eng. Denise, bon dia.
Bom dia. Good morning, everyone. It's really a pleasure to be here. I'm really impressed with everything that I've seen so far. I'm here. I'm president of Language Without Borders. For those that are not acquainted with the program, it's an outcome from Science Without Borders. It's a major program, mobility program that was launched in 2011 that sent more than 100,000 students abroad. And this program is the basis for the foreign language teaching in Brazil. We have 96 institutions in the program, and we proctor more than 500,000 tests, online tests and paper tests. So we deal with language proficiency. We give support to the institutions to make the students better proficient in 7 different languages: English, German, Italian, French, Spanish, Japanese, Portuguese for foreigners, and now the next step is to include Mandarin in our portfolio. That's why I'm really pleased to be here, because I think we can have a lot of partnerships. We have 15 partners in the program and 9 countries included in it. So it'd be a pleasure to have Mandarin and to share some ideas with you as well.
Thank you, Denise. And now from our neighbor from the north, Canada, Chris.
Good morning. My name is Chris Treadwell, and I'm very pleased to be here. This is a great conference and a great time to share. In New Brunswick, Canada, and we're located just north of Maine, about 750,000 people, so it's a small province. And we're trying to change our economy from a natural resource-based economy of pulp and mines to a human capital-based concept where we believe that our most important natural resource is people. So to do that, we have to leverage public education in a new way. We have to reimagine public education. How can we address cultural diversity, bring more people to our province, to address trade, and to address the quality of life of our students? So Mandarin and the Chinese culture, being one of the great cultures of the world, needs to be part of our focus. So we're working hard to scale up what are very quality projects or programs with classrooms or schools to make it province-wide, and that's a challenge.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you, the entire panel, for the introduction to the initiatives. that you are leading in your countries to advance the teaching and learning of Chinese language and culture. We have structured the panel to learn as much as possible from them, from their initiatives and their program models, as well as to gain some knowledge and of how they resolve some of the challenges. So we'll focus on the models for a while now, and then we'll get to the challenges that they have faced, what they have learned as a result of that, and the things that probably will be most useful to us as we embark and further our agenda for teaching Chinese language and culture in the United States. So Winnie, I'm going to look to you right now for you to describe France's vision and model for Chinese language education, and especially the components you believe are most promising and relevant for us here in the United States in terms of our diversity, educational system, or I should say systems, and current political climate. So would you like to take that one on, Winnie?
Thank you. I begin by a short history of Chinese studies and teaching in France. Mm-hmm. Let's have a look. In 1914, first chair the langue chinoise and Tatar Manchu in the College of France. In 1943, a first department of Chinese language in the Institute of Oriental Languages. In 1958, there was a first secondary school teaching Chinese in the Western countries. In 1950s and 80s, there were first seeds of the didactic of Chinese. What is especially to characterize France is a cultural curiosity towards China, towards Chinese world. For example, in 1755, Voltaire wrote The Chinese Orphan from a True Story of China. This is why a number of significant sinologists have worked and still work contribution to Chinese studies around the world. And all these elements lead to educational policy in promoting the learning of Chinese language and culture in secondary schools. The Chinese language teaching in France is marked with the seal of historic precedence and of the extent of its spread in primary, secondary, and higher education. But its main feature is probably the fact that it is structured in a discipline, among other foreign languages, with a program, syllabus, official teaching progressings, academic reflection on the specificity of a no-alphabetic writing language in his teaching, learning, and assessment. In summary, the teaching of Chinese language has been integrated into the French education system since its beginning, which is an important asset. The vision and model of foreign language learning in France is based on the policy of plurilingualism with the diversified offer of languages in secondary and high schools. Students can learn 2 foreign languages in middle school and a 3rd language in high school. Chinese language benefits from this policy. Since 1957, it began to appear in the landscape as the 3rd language that students choose. It is becoming more and more a 2nd foreign language or 1st foreign language studied by students in middle school. Students learn Chinese for a longer period, 6 years or more. Another specificity in France is language learning combined with the learning of the other's culture. Secondary school programs have 2 cantons: the definition of the linguistic content and the experted level on all language activities according to the European framework, and the cultural concept or terms which must be integrated in all teaching and in all assessment. Linguistic performance and cultural richness are necessarily linked. A third component is the national policy to promote young mobility in the form of exchange between Chinese and French schools. Hundreds of schools sent their students to Asia and also received students from China, Taiwan, Singapore, etc. Now let me give you some statistics. At a national level, since 1997, Chinese reached the 5th rank in terms of number of learners. This 5th rank has been stable for 20 years. There is a record growth, 400% in 10 years. This is a very satisfactory result, but there is less 1% of students studying Chinese in secondary school despite strong social demand. Although the absolute number of Chinese students remains low, the teaching of Chinese future ought to be highlighted. The Chinese teaching in France is essentially in the educational system. In secondary school, more than 50,000 students, almost half of all learners, 100 learners. The Chinese teaching occurs within guidelines set by the ministry official programs. Like the other 9 languages mainly taught in secondary school, students learn in regular courses a language that is recognized as an official language for all examinations. Thank you.
Thank you, Winnie, Thank you for outlining the historical perspective of your country's engagement in the promotion of Chinese language and culture, as well as highlighting the key components we also find essential for successful programs, like the study abroad, the curriculum, the assessment, and so forth. And speaking of assessment, we're always very, very concerned with performance outcomes, learner outcomes. And I want to turn to you, Ing-Hui, if you don't mind, and ask you to share with us in terms of performance outcomes, learner achievement, whatever label you want to put on it, career impact, political will, social cohesiveness. What features of your model do you believe has yielded the most fruitful outcomes in Singapore?
Yep. Yes, assessment and outcomes, that's always important. Mm-hmm. But if you ask me what is key to the outcomes, in Singapore, we believe in people. Uh-huh. Just like Chris has mentioned, Singapore has no natural resources at all. So our only natural resource is our people. Uh-huh. And therefore, we believe very much in the professional development of our people. And to, just like we want every child to go up to as high a level as possible, we want our people, our teachers, to be able to be as professional as possible. And that is at the gates and as well as throughout the career. So to become a teacher in Singapore, it's not easy. I mean, there's a lot of people who want to be a teacher, a lot of application process and all that. And after they have become a teacher, there's professional training for 1 year. And after that, there's compulsory training throughout the year as well. Formal training, face-to-face training, as well as professional learning circles, communities, within one school and across schools. Yeah. So these are all the professional part of the development that's important. And just like the McKinsey report mentioned, a system is as good as people. So that is really one key belief that we have. We want to develop our people so that we see a good teacher, we place a good teacher in a classroom, the teacher can perform magic. Yeah. So that's where we believe that, you want outcomes, you have to invest in your people. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
No question about it. Absolutely. Thank you. In addition to learner outcomes, one of the things we all worry about, I believe I do in California for sure, I trust that some of our audience members also do, is the whole concept of sustainability. How do we sustain these programs into the future with the same level and high quality that we expect from all of our programs? So maybe I'll address this to Catherine here. And when you analyze your program model, what components do you believe are indispensable in terms of implementing a sustainable strategy directed at increasing the number of students who dedicate themselves to acquiring a professional level of Chinese language and culture? Would you like to respond to that?
Yes, of course. Well, I think possibly it goes really fundamentally back to teachers again, doesn't it? And I think for us in the UK, the first is, and it's also, I think, what Winnie said about mainstreaming Chinese. Mm-hmm. So we have done a lot of work, and we are in a good position to do that at the Institute of Education on teacher education. So we have an expanding program, but the demand is still even greater for initial teacher education. So it's supporting teachers and developing them. So that's fundamentally it. And certainly in the UK, we've been very lucky to have the support from Hanban teachers as well, which certainly in the Mandarin Excellence program with the 4 hours of Chinese a week and individual help for learners, that's proven very beneficial. So sustainability fundamentally must be teachers, but as well as that, obviously, it's about getting the curriculum right, getting the examinations right. I think when we first started in the UK, the examinations weren't at the right level, so students weren't doing very well. You can't grow a subject if these students come out with poor exams. And I think research around that, research around pedagogy is also very important. So I think we've built up with that. Then, fundamentally, sustainability is around head teacher engagement. It's, again, this advocacy. So it's advocacy with politicians, but it's making absolutely sure that the head teachers remain engaged. Because if they don't, then it's very easy for things to slip back to the status quo ante, I think. So press, working with the press, working with government, and certainly for our program, for the Mandarin Excellence program, which I think really is relevant for you here in the US, because I think for us it's proven, what's very exciting about this program is that people are beginning to prick up their ears and say, gosh, these children are really fluent, and I can talk about that more later, but they are really fluent with that much Chinese a week. So perhaps we should be doing this for French and German and Spanish too. Like, actually, it's not that difficult, is it? You know, across Europe, children have far more curriculum hours than our children do. So it's, again, it's making people aware of the success of the program. But fundamental to it all is what you are all here today, it's teachers.
No question about it. Teachers is the agent of change. Anybody else want to jump on that as far as sustainability in your countries, what you're doing in terms of sustainability? That may vary. Chris, looks like you're ready.
I think one of the key things is to address student engagement. Uh-huh. We have been guilty over the years of teaching subjects in isolation. Mm-hmm. So a student takes 12-0 Mandarin in high school and he can speak the language. But it doesn't mean that we've addressed the student's passions. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean we've helped the child to understand the value of this language, so it's something larger. So we need to sustain this by getting the engagement higher, so students really understand the value of doing this. And in our province, we are a bilingual province, the only bilingual province in Canada, Francophone, Anglophone. So we're in a situation where about 40% of our students will take French immersion. And so that means that in a very crowded curriculum, it's already kind of filled up with French. But even though that's an advantage in being bilingual, we want our people to be trilingual, you know, and to speak more than 2 languages. So we have a problem with sustainability with policy. And policy and practice sometimes get in the way of common sense and the idea that if the child is the curriculum, we need to give more opportunities to say, okay, not every child learns at the same pace. Not every child needs the same aspects in the curriculum. We need to become more flexible to sustain whatever we do and be far more personalized in a public education system. So we're moving away from a standardized approach to one that affects each child and having them understand the value of it for their personal future.
Go ahead. Denise?
Yeah, I think one more thing about sustainability is we have to be very aware of quality of what we are doing and to have a responsible growth. Because in such big countries as Brazil, China, the States, and Canada, sometimes when we are dealing with government, they want results in just 4 years. And because they need the results for the next election. And when they come to us, they want to have results in language in 4 years. And we say, excuse me, but we cannot teach our students in just 4 years to be very proficient. We don't have a magic wand. It's not just plug and play. We wish, but it's not. So we have to have a lot of patience in order to make them understand that in education, everything that we do in a 10-year period. Education is the way it is. And we have to have good instruments, good tools to assure the quality of what we are doing. I think that's the greatest challenge when you talk about sustainability.
If I could just add to that, the idea, it's very true, 4 years or whatever is not a long enough time, but one of the key things that we're facing is that we need to move the onus away just from public education. We need strong community engagement, strong business engagement, so that the sustainability is not with bureaucrats and politicians, but with true community voice. So there's lots of experience opportunities, there's lots of opportunity for partnership, and we'll sustain it by doing it as a community, not as being something rigid in a public education system.
That's right.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Can we just resonate with that? It's really about the beliefs as a community in the people as well. So it spoke about the teachers, and it's about the students as well. The students, do they believe in this? And we have 2 prongs. We talk about the opportunities to create for the students to appreciate the beauty of the language and culture. This is the hard part. We need to get the students to believe and to appreciate the hard part, as well as the hate part. These 2 prongs might work for different people. Some might know the hate part is the ability to have utility of this, what they learn in different fields, in different career progression, not just as a teacher. So if they are proficient in Chinese, they can go into different fields. We heard yesterday, market research, human, healthcare, all kinds of possibilities. So with these beliefs in the whole system, that might be something that can bring about sustainability.
Yes.
Go ahead. Go ahead. You were going to ask?
Yeah, no, I was just going to agree with that, I think, and say that I think mainstreaming the subject as well is making Chinese, there's 2 things I wanted to say. One is a part of the languages offering. So to start with, when we first began it, it was very much, there was French, German, and Spanish here and Chinese over here, whereas now it's mainstream, so it's a languages department, and that is really very important. And then the other thing about the Mandarin Excellence Program, which has been important in terms of student engagement and parent engagement, actually, is the fact that it's presented opportunities to bring children together who are on that program from all parts of the country, so they can see other young people. So when, you know, the going gets tough and they think, gee, I signed up for this 8 hours a week, you know, this is getting too much, they go and they meet at something, you know, at a student event, other children from far-flung parts of the country who are on the same programs they are, and that's very exciting. So it gathers momentums with parents, with local news, so it pushes the idea forward, I think.
Absolutely. Thank you for those suggestions. Lots and lots of wonderful ways to sustain the momentum that we're now seeing in our country, certainly, and some of your countries, with the teaching of Mandarin, and how we can integrate it further, as you just stated, as well as promote it as a community value, a student value, certainly a teacher's value, because we're all vested in it. So thank you for those ideas. We're going to, turn a little bit, because we want to learn about some of the challenges that you may have faced along the way. We certainly have faced our challenges in the last 10, 12 years that we have sort of moving Chinese further along on our agenda here. And if you could share some of the challenges that you have faced in your efforts to advance the vision and mission of expanding the numbers of citizens who are competent in Chinese language and culture in your country. So anybody can take that one.
Okay.
I've
just got my name against it. Grant's got us very organised here.
Go ahead,
and then I'll just speak very briefly and go on. I mean, I think until now it's been a lack of time, in the UK perspective, isn't there hasn't been enough time on the curriculum. So in year 7, which is the 11-year-olds, they get an hour a week, or if they're really unlucky, an hour a fortnight. Now that you can't learn a language with that level of curriculum. And also what it doesn't allow to do is to think about, okay, so we're teaching it communicatively like we do French, German and Spanish, but there are some specifics about Chinese which that aren't necessarily harder but take more time. We need to get to grips with teaching and thinking about what makes Chinese different in terms of teaching the characters, in terms of teaching tones and pronunciation, etc. We haven't had the time to do that often, and so it's been a race to drill vocabulary to try and get the children up to the 16-year-old GCSE exams in the UK, because they've got to do that because we've got to prove that we can do Chinese just as well as French, German and Spanish. I think with our new programme, that is solving that to a large extent. But at the same time, just briefly, the downside of that is occasionally you get left field things coming in from, in the UK perspective, we've suddenly got a new school accountants a framework that measure for schools, which they have to have children passing the English baccalaureate at age 16, which has to include one language. Schools get measured on outcomes, so schools at the moment are thinking, gosh, it's a bit risky doing that for Chinese, so maybe we'll stick with French after all. So, so on one hand, the government's very, very enthusiastic and wanting it to grow, but at the same time, we suddenly get something coming in from another part of the government, which makes things a little tougher than it might otherwise have been.
Well,
Denise?
Yes, I think from all of the countries here, Brazil has a timid initiative in terms of teaching Mandarin. And I can say that the challenges for for this situation is mainly because, we have for about 6 or 8 Confucius Institute all over the country. It's too timid, I think, for the size of Brazil. And we just ran a survey the last days asking our students, we have 2 million students in our database, if they are interested in learning Mandarin. And I got astonished with the results. We had more than 100,000 respondents, and from these 100,000, 92,000 said yes.
Wow.
And we don't have the infrastructure to do that. We don't have human resources. In my program, what we do is we have these institutions, the higher education institutions, and we have a foreign language program for those pre-service teachers, and we use this human resource in those institutions, so it's a language program. We make our coordinators that are language specialists teach those pre-service teachers in how to address internationalization and in language, and then as an outcome, they teach the academic community. So it's very similar to the Star Talk that we are talking this morning. And I'm really pleased to know that there's such a great initiative here. But we don't have Chinese programs in Brazil, to educate new Chinese teachers. So if we don't have a strong partnership with different institutions and organizations such as Confucius Institute and other ones, we don't go forward. Even though we have a great relationship with the BRICS in Brazil and China, and we need that. We need to teach Chinese and the Chinese culture to all this target group. We lack the main sources, that is this infrastructure and human resources. So I think this is the main challenge that I have to face right now.
Any other challenges? Yes, Chris?
What we've found is that we've really not had the public debate yet, about why we need to do this. So right now, it's pretty well been imposed by bureaucrats, politicians, but we've not had that community discussion. So we need to create a strategic table so that there's this idea of why this is so critical that our students must have that. Now, I believe that our parents want this, but sometimes the bureaucracy is slow to address what the market wants. We've been very guilty of putting new ideas over old pedagogy. We've done that with computer technology too. We just put things in, haven't trained teachers, said we've got something new, and it's fallen apart. So we really have to have that debate, make sure that our quality of teachers are there, have the partnerships with the Chinese institutions like the Confucius Institute, so that there's a true partnership that's providing the circumstances for our success. It's been kind of random and isolated. We need to pull it together.
Anybody else want to weigh in?
Well, pretty similar. In fact, yes, it's pretty similar. It's great to know that we are not the only country to have challenges in terms of competing demands. Yeah, so the beauty of Singapore is that we are that small. So in terms of doing it, we are doing it. But in terms of curriculum time, that's always a challenge. Yeah, so there's so much to learn. There's computer, there's soft skills, there's social emotional skills that we need to learn. So time is always a challenge. And the other challenge I would say is maybe we spoke about beliefs just now, but some people do have these limiting beliefs that it's hard to learn a new language. It's hard to learn Chinese. So once you have people with limiting beliefs, it's harder for them to be converted. But that's something that I believe is important to work on, so that the momentum will be there for everyone to be concerted in our efforts. Yeah.
Thank you. Anybody else? Go ahead.
I think a challenge for France is the quality. How we can do for remaining the motivation of students in Chinese studying, Chinese learning during longer period. For the third language, it's not a problem because students start at 15 years. They are more mature. They can get the good results. But for the children who start at 11 years, the period is longer. Several children, after 2 years, don't like continue. How remain this motivation? How promote Chinese in the best conditions? I think the training is very important. I spent many hours in my work for training. Every year, all Chinese teachers have 2 days for training. in every academy. We have 3 axes for training. The first is pedagogy. The second is how manage students. The third is how promote Chinese teaching in the schools. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris?
Could I add one more thing? The issue of equity needs to be discussed.
Absolutely.
So in our province, we have 3 larger cities, and that's where most of the Mandarin teaching is taking place. Now, in a civilized world, we want to make sure that we don't use education to create gaps.
Greater gaps.
Exactly. So we have an urban-rural issue, where the urban students are getting an advantage in life by being able to pick up Mandarin as a 3rd language, whereas our rural students don't. So we have to make sure that for moral purposes, that students across the whole province need to get that access. Otherwise, we're promoting inequity. So we're taking a look now much more at technology to address that rural problem.
Absolutely. Thank you for bringing that up, because we wrestle with that issue day in and day out in California. Because we want to make sure that our programs are equitable for every single student within the borders of our state. We want all those students represented in the Chinese language classroom. We also shared in your issue of the 2-year issue, because it's tied a lot to the university requirement of 2 years or 3 years, and that's where students, want to stop, and then we have to do a lot of different things to motivate them to continue into the 3rd, 4th, and continue to study the same language. So it's a policy issue with the university, as well as the motivational issue to promote the language among our students and parents and communities. I believe that everyone in the audience here, as well as I here, we all bring a story to how we came into this work. We came into this work, obviously, with a lot of passion. We've seen it here on stage. We've seen it throughout the conference here, particularly last night. And there's no question here that you're all very vested in moving your country's initiative forward in support of teaching, Chinese language and culture, and actually expanding those programs. Can you share with us, I think all of us would be interested, how you came to this work and what academic, professional, and leadership qualities are essential to build this kind of sustainable initiative over time?
Shall I start?
Why not?
Okay, I'll start. So I'm always quite good at starting on this kind of question for a student audience, because my pathway was slightly random, but certainly I had no idea what I wanted to do at university. I thought about Chinese. What finally decided me in those days was the head teacher, because you couldn't do Chinese at school then, there was no chance. So it was the head teacher in my school getting me in and saying, come into my office, you want to do Chinese? Communists, very old, dodgy, don't do it. And that decided me at 18, that is what I'm going to do. So from then on, I never...
The rebel in you.
Yeah, absolutely. So she produced completely the opposite outcome. Then I worked in... I think it's the cross-cultural element of being able to use language as a skill to develop relationships between the 2 countries. So in the 1980s, I'm giving away my age now, I worked in Sino-British trade. So it was the first Chinese trade delegations coming to the UK and vice versa. Really enjoyed it because it was opening doors for both sides. Absolutely. Then in the 90s, I got into teaching. I felt pretty alone. There's not very many people in the area where I was working. So I started this idea of beginning, that was really early then, beginning a network. And then in the early 2000s, that became a possibility for the organization I worked for. So started building the Chinese network, which we've got in England today. So I guess his passion is one thing. The other thing is obviously a reasonable, sort of the academic background, working in the university, enjoying being involved in research and teacher education. But a lot of it is to do, and then the other thing, which I think you really have to have in doing something new, is resilience, because it tends to, it's so difficult.
Absolutely.
I mean, I think when I first started the teacher training program at the Institute of Education, the director of the Institute of Education, he introduced me and said, Catherine's going to be doing Mandarin Chinese teacher education. And the European Languages Fraternity then, who were all sat round a table, they looked and, really? And you could feel the room. And I thought, oh, yes, this is what's going to happen. And eventually they've come around to it. They love it now, but it took a while. So I think it's that resilience which is very important too.
Denise, you're about to embark on this work. So what's bringing you to this work?
When I was a teenager, I said, I want to be a language teacher. I'm learning English. And I never imagined that I would be at the Ministry of Education running a program so huge like this one. And it happened all of a sudden because of Science Without Borders and because the government needed the language specialists in a certain point. They launched the program without knowing that the students had enough proficiency to go abroad. If they asked us, the language specialists would say they don't. But things that don't work in the way we want. But it was good at that time. I was running another program in distance education, a national program. I was a leader of a group, of a national group. So as I have this two profile, that I'm a specialist in languages and teacher education, and also specialist in distance education, I was required to put an idea to draw, design the program. I didn't know about StarTalk at the time. It would be very, very useful for me, I can assure you. But it was very interesting that I learned through these 6 years that I'm running the program. I totally agree with Catherine about endurance, resilience, but also flexibility. Of course, you know that Brazil is facing a political turmoil. Who doesn't? But in a way that was very difficult because this program was launched by the last government. Then we suffered an impeachment. And the program was, in a situation that I have to assure that I was there for technical reasons, not for political reasons. And so I'm still running the program. The program is still on. They are giving financial support for it. And they understood that is the structure for internationalization process at the universities. And I think that when you were a specialist and you build a network, and I'm very pleased to see such a huge network that you have here, that's the strong basis for everything. So if you want to do something and get something in return from government mainly, we need this strong network. So we have to build this trust, this sense of belonging that we have here. And this, more than endurance, is that the feeling that you were doing something, you were making the difference. In a world of intolerance that we are facing right now, I think that we are a force for good. We are teaching people, and we have to be very aware of that. We are teaching people how to understand other people's culture and language, understand them. It doesn't matter which language or culture. And I'm really eager to have you or have Mandarin as a force for good in Brazil too.
Intercultural understanding.
Yes.
Definitely a motivator here. Anybody else want to jump on that for what
if I
brings you
just
to
jump
this
in.
work?
About passion. Yes, that's a word that I've heard. And passion, not just of one, but of many. A shared passion, shared culture, and that's the thing that we need to build. And that we all say that you can Google for information, but you cannot Google for passion.
Wonderful. Okay, you shared how you came to this work. You shared some of the challenges you faced along the pathway. I want you to focus on your successes at this time. And we want to highlight some of the successes, the things that, warms your heart when you reflect upon your journey in this work, and the things that have brought you some professional and personal rewards as you have engaged in this work. So, Chris, you want to take that one on from that corner of the world there?
Certainly, it's a pleasure to be an educator, because when you see the growth in students and you see that you're providing the opportunity for a better life, it's very motivating. So at my last school where I was a principal, it was becoming clear to me that even though we were doing many things right, we were lacking a global competency issue. In other words, we certainly had bilingual education when it came to English and French, but the curriculum needed to include things that are more international. So we moved to a trilingual system. So the Confucius Institute supported us in finding people to guide us and how would we do trilingual in an overcrowded curriculum with a system that was bureaucratic and very slow to make change. How do you have it so that every child gets exposure to 3 languages? And then worry is the community and the union. There's all kinds of operational issues to consider. But we've put in Mandarin. Every child in that particular school gets Mandarin every week. It's official in the curriculum, and that sends a very significant communique to parents in saying that it's no longer just an after-school program or noontime. It is so important that every student in that school gets Mandarin exposure that it's embedded. Everybody gets it. And so I feel very good about that because I know that students in our province can get Mandarin at university, but I'd like to see them start much younger than that. Not only to pick up the language, but to understand the value of it. So our trilingual school that we have in that particular city, in that school, I'd like to amplify that and get it across the whole province so that we're now having a much bigger debate as to what public education should look like in our province.
Wonderful. Anybody else?
Yes, just following on that theme of opportunities for all. I think it's the individual little instances, isn't it? So I was at a school in East Hull, in the northeast of England a few weeks ago. It's in a really deprived part of the country. As I drove up to the school in a taxi, there's lots and lots of the surrounding houses all boarded up. It doesn't look great. Talked to the head teacher. They've had Chinese on curriculum for a long time. They've got a great Chinese teacher, native speaker with a very good Yorkshire accent. But she has, he talked about there's 2 things that are raising expectations in this school. One is rugby scholarships to play rugby league at Hull Kingston Rovers, the local rugby team. The other is Chinese. And those children are learning Chinese as an opportunity for all. And then on top of that, some of them are on the Mandarin Excellence Program. They're not from well-off homes. They're not from homes that have got lots of things. Those children are coming in every single morning at 8, which is an hour before normal school starts, to do that extra hour of Chinese. The parents are vested in it. The children are vested in it. And then the rest of the school that haven't necessarily opted to do the Mandarin Excellence Program have still got Chinese on curriculum as well. And those kind of individual stories, and you can see what a difference it's making to the lives of some of the children in that school, for me, makes it all very worthwhile.
Anyone want to jump in? Go ahead.
Me or?
Yeah, go ahead, Denise.
Go ahead.
We'll go to you.
We discuss about challenges, and of course we have to share success as well. I think with the program, we reached 96 institutions and make them think about their language policy. It's something that we are supporting, but they are autonomous to design their own language policy that has to include very open and transparent rules for foreign languages in their community. I think that's one thing. The other thing is the language specialists were invisible inside the university. People just looked for us when they were in that moment that they had to learn a foreign language to go abroad. And nowadays, things are changing. We are being part of groups, people that want to foresee a new situation for their community, to the academic community. So we are being included in some specific boards. We are being included, we are being heard. So I think this is a great success that came from the program, and I'm very pleased to see that happening.
If I could just add a quick one. My core work is in curriculum planning. So our success is that it's really a pleasure to see the curriculum being useful for different learners. I forgot to mention that actually while we have Chinese, we have also different learners across our system who are also learning Chinese. And in fact, we are quite pleased that our Singapore curriculum is even used in Utah, if I'm not wrong. Yeah, and across the globe as well. We have people using it in Indonesia, Thailand, everywhere. Yeah, so I guess that's something that we are happy with.
Yeah.
I am going to pose the last question to our panel here, but I definitely, and then open it up to the audience. And I wanted to share that we have a microphone set up in the front of the room here. You could just line up right now with your questions, because I'm sure you have lots of questions for our panels, and we're going to have at least 10 or 15 minutes for questions. But before we move to that, I want to ask one last question. Our conference is just over a decade old. We're reflecting back into the past and to the successes that we've had, how we moved the teaching and learning of Chinese language forward. I would like for you to share, where do you see your country's initiative to advance the teaching and learning of Chinese move in the next 5 or 10 years? Because we're all in this community of learning together, and we might benefit from what do you see in your country's work moving forward as we also move our work forward here in the United States over the next 5 and 10 years. Anybody else want to lead with that? Forecasting the future.
Forecasting the future. So I wish I could have a crystal ball to see what's going to be the next election's result. But anyway.
That is a concern for a lot of us.
From my point of view, if we keep doing what we're doing, we're going to have Mandarin in our portfolio, and we'll be very glad to have it. And in 10 years, probably I'll be here in a different situation, giving good results of what we are doing together. But mainly, I think we have changed the mindset. That's what you said, the difficulty of people thinking about learning a foreign language, sometimes a distant foreign language, in a different alphabet, in a different way of writing or different way of thinking. So if we could put all of those languages together and make people more aware of their possibilities, I think we're going to reach a very good level of a very good achievement, right? So I hope in 10 years we'll be here just to share these great results.
Changing mindsets is a very important part of our mission. Absolutely. Anybody else? 10 years from now?
I could just, I agree entirely with that, and I think looking at everybody here, and we have a conference in the UK as well, I'm sure others do, and there are a lot of people who are very enthusiastic and dedicated to doing this. So I think on the back of that dedication, we can achieve great things. I think at the same time, it's important to remember that there's still a lot to do as well. I don't want to end on a negative note, but there is still a lot to do. Talking here to all you're the converted. I do that all the time in the UK with teachers who are vested into this. But there is a lot out there still to do of people for whom Chinese, or maybe certainly in the UK, even French or German or Spanish is hardly on their radar. So there's quite a lot of work remaining for us and for other enthusiastic and driven professionals like us.
Chris, next 10 years?
I think it's really critical that we appreciate the best practice that's around the world, because even though we have to respect the local culture, whether it's Brazil or Singapore, there are best practices. And right now, I think that kind of networking is in its infancy, because I come here and I'm just wowed by how many great things are happening, and I had no idea about it. And so I try to... Exactly. So I think as we work together, it doesn't matter. The students can move to Brazil, or they can move to England, and they're going to be experiencing the very best education possible. Every child in the world deserves that. So I think you'll probably see more of that.
Yeah, thank you. Ing, Singapore's future?
Well, we hope that our students will become global contributors.
Absolutely.
Who can just go anywhere from Silicon Valley to Guangzhou, and they will be just a fish in water everywhere they go to.
Francis? Go ahead.
I hope in 10 years, perhaps in the French companies in China and in French embassies and consulates in China, there are fewer interpreters. We can foster more mutual understanding. To use a term in the French high school cultural program, l'art de vivre ensemble, the art of living together.
Yeah. Thank you. And we have exactly 10 minutes and 23 seconds for questions. And we'd like to open it up for questions. Anybody else want to come to the front of the room and pose a question to any member of the audience here? This is a unique opportunity, so don't be shy. Mike, here comes someone. Go ahead.
First, Mr. Chairman, my name is Hugo de Berg from Kensington Way, dual language Chinese-English school in London, England. And thank you very much for this very interesting, stimulating panel. Several of your panelists have referred to the demands of Chinese teaching in terms of time, in terms of pedagogy, and so on and so forth, and suggested that there may have been some clash sometimes between the institution which is taking them on and the Chinese teaching in the curriculum. So I'd like to ask the panel whether they have found that Chinese teaching has invigorated or changed or developed the way people teach other subjects in schools. Thank you.
I know that it has in the United States, but I want to give the opportunity to the panel. Anybody want to take that on? Has Chinese changed how languages are being taught across the board? Go ahead, Chris.
In our school, in the last school I was at, we had our Chinese teachers co-teach the language with our non-Chinese teachers. And what happened was that there was an exchange of ideas. So in fact, it was a great professional learning opportunity. And I noticed our teachers grew from being exposed to the Chinese teachers because they're right there co-teaching with them. That was a very powerful experience. So clearly that happened.
In Brazil, we are just in baby steps, as you know, but we are implementing foreign language means of instruction. And what we've seen so far, the professors of other subjects that teach in a different language, they learn so much, different things, different ways of addressing the students. They are so used, for instance, math teachers, you can use that, or physics. They don't have the methodology. They've not been trained or educated to understand different ways of teaching or addressing students. So they reported they got better teachers after that.
Out of the washback. Anybody else?
I think just briefly on languages in particular, just an anecdotal picture of one of my students who's got a postgraduate certificate education for teaching Chinese, went to teach at a small school in Cambridgeshire. And they tended to think that actually all languages were too difficult for their children. Then the arrival of Mr. Fan has raised expectations, and the children have discovered they can do languages, they can do Chinese, because he won't let anybody say they can't, whatever set they're put in. And that has had a very beneficial knock-on effect to the languages, to French and Spanish, which is also offered in the school.
Absolutely. Ying?
Hi, my name is Ying, and coming from Cupertino, California, a Chinese teacher there. I'm really happy to have this chance hearing your thoughts and sharing your ideas with us. One thing we have seen happening in this country is that really Chinese is growing. For example, this year there were 4 Chinese teachers got awarded as Teacher of the Year from their states. And Kentucky, Florida, New Mexico, and Rhode Island. We're happy and celebrate, their work. Among the 4 teachers, 2 of them are non-native Chinese teachers. And I really think non-native Chinese teachers provide their unique perspective into this profession. So any suggestions to those non-native Chinese teachers? That's my question. Thank you.
You mean to recruit more of those teachers to come into the Chinese teaching?
How do we bring their unique
contributions?
Contributions, yes. Thank you.
Well, I think they first have to decide to become teachers, don't they? So we are trying to do quite a lot of work with university Chinese departments. So we have 15 at the Institute of Education doing this postgraduate certificate to learn to teach this year. and 5 of those are non-native speakers and 10 native speakers, but not just from mainland China, from Singapore, from Hong Kong, from the Chinese-speaking diaspora. So it is changing. I think it took a while to change because to start with, they were all getting jobs all over the place, largely in the city of London in the UK perspective, and they weren't sure that they get a full-time position with Chinese. But now we've got beyond that, so some of them are thinking they will come into teaching. But I think we've, certainly in the UK, and I'm sure it's the same here, it's a matter of going out and engaging with university Chinese departments and saying, come on, come and look at what it's like teaching in schools. You can contribute to something really fantastic that's really going to make an impact on the future of your country.
Anybody else?
Agree. I agree.
Agree? Next question.
Good morning. My name is Li Chen. I come from International Leadership of Texas. I'm a Chinese teacher there. We are preparing our students to be global leaders by requiring them to master the Spanish, English, Chinese languages. So what I do in school is teaching Chinese as a second language. But I know in America, especially in the state of Utah, a lot of schools adopt the immersion program. Teachers teach other subjects like science, math by using the Chinese language. Actually, I have a question for the representative from Singapore. I know a lot of speakers in Singapore has the Chinese heritage. They can speak some basic Chinese or they can speak fluent Chinese. I want to know what programs does the school in Singapore adopt? Immersion program of teaching Chinese as a second language, or even the approach we use in China, like the subject 语文 in Chinese. We teach Chinese, the language and its literature and history and culture. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. In fact, before I came here, I was trying to understand what's the meaning of immersion, because we don't do the immersion approach over there. But do we do it as a subject? I'm not so sure as well. Because within our curriculum, we try to cover different things as well. So while we only have it as a subject, within our curriculum, we do cover aspects including current affairs, social studies, science, not so much of math, maybe time-telling, maybe. Yeah. So how do we do our curriculum is such that we really, put it inside a subject. We have exposure time every day for them, minimally 1 hour, I would say, yeah, for different levels, more at the lower levels, definitely. And that the curriculum is such that we have differentiation for those who are higher ability, or more interested. They will be able to go deeper into the culture, into the history, or take out even additional subjects such as translation, history in China, etc. So there's a lot of choices for our students. Yeah.
Always a complex idea. Your question, please?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Enrique Granados. I am a admissions officer at School Year Abroad. We have 4 programs around the world in language immersion focused, Spanish, French, Italian, and Chinese. And domestically in the US, there's been a very large conversation around the presence of STEM. And so hearing the perspective from Canada, from Singapore about human capital, how do you guys find yourselves either arguing for or battling for space in a school day that is up against global skills such as coding or other technology skills that are extremely marketable at this point? Thank you.
You want to take that one out?
Yeah, I will just continue with that. I would say that we don't really see things in dichotomy, that the learning of language and culture is a cultural balance for people. Be it going to coding or going into engineering in future, they will need that skill of language. That's where we are coming from. Yes, the curriculum is very crowded. Time is very limited, as always. But the belief that it has to be balanced. So we do come from a very Asian kind of thinking that balance is important. Yeah, so we don't sway too much from one end or the other. And we try to do both. Sometimes we're a bit greedy, yes. But we believe that it's important to have the base. So for foundational years, that's where we do more of the languages. as well as some numeracy skills, literacy skills. And at higher levels, we go deeper into maybe the professions. So for example, for myself, I'm very much into science when I was a student. I'm actually stronger in science and math, but later on, I just decided to go into language. So it's a choice for students.
That was a very good question. Actually, we do experience that challenge. What comes out, though, is that we try not to have that dichotomy. We found from our studies and disaggregating analysis on our immersion programs in French that, in fact, our top kids are not doing very well when it came to the STEM subjects. The reason being that our French immersion teachers are primarily language teachers. Okay, so there was a heavy emphasis on teaching languages, and the STEM subjects got pushed out because they were not trained really to teach the STEM. So in my last school, I had to actually remove immersion teachers and bring in others who could actually use the French language as the means to teach STEM, because it shouldn't be one or the other. So those teachers now were expected to teach French, but inside the teaching of French, they'd be teaching coding, they'd be teaching physics, whatever else it was, because we had leaned too much towards just picking up the language at the expense of STEM, and that was a very terrible thing for our top students.
Our time has expired. I'm going to ask the two individuals who are sitting ready to ask a question to come up. The panel will be here. We'll be able to respond to your questions individually. But I would like to ask all of you at this time to help me thank our panel for the wonderful knowledge and importation that they have provided us. Thank you. The panel will be here to respond to your questions. Thank you very much.